everybody out there watching us live. We hope you're out there. And if you are, we're going to do a book review of Tara Mohr's book, Playing Big. And we would be thrilled for you to chime in the chat if you have thoughts as we're chatting. Even if you watch the replay, feel free to jump in and add your comments. We always like to have a good conversation started. Right, so here we are. This is Emily, and Susan is with me. And we're going to talk about, like I said, Playing Big by Tara Mohr. So I'll do a quick summary first, and then we'll kind of get into the things that resonated about the book and the things that maybe didn't resonate so much, which we really like this book. We don't have a ton of criticism, but we do have some thoughts about an interesting points that we noticed as we were going back over our notes. So both of us read this book quite some time ago. I think I read it about, maybe I meant to look up when it was published, but I read this book probably 2 or 3 years ago. How about you, Susan? When did you read it?
I read it just over a year ago. I think it was the beginning of last year. So, and I don't think I want to say it was published like in 2014, 2015, not a long time ago.
Yeah, that sounds about right. A few years ago. And so I was at an earlier stage in my business. And so I think that's key to the context of this, because it really resonated with me at that point where I was really stepping into something new for myself and trying to build up from the ground. And so I think this book is especially useful for someone in a transition period, and because that's where the kinds of fear that she brings up really comes into play. Okay, so quick summary. This book is all about helping women, especially, play bigger in their work, their careers, and their lives. And she says in the introduction that the book was born of a frustration and a hope. So she said, the frustration is looking around and seeing all these smart women who are not stepping forward and leading in ways that they admire others for doing. Like, I wish I could do what this person does, right? I wish I could have a business like this person, that kind of stuff. And so that's the frustration she wanted us to help with. And the hope is that the world could actually be changed by our greater participation. So women who are maybe not so comfortable standing in the spotlight, stepping forward. She thinks the world could be changed. And so she goes through, she thinks a lot of the fear of playing big comes down to the inner life and what's happening inside our minds. And she talks a lot about building up what she calls the inner infrastructure. So we've been sort of conditioned to have a certain infrastructure, and then if we want to play big, we need to sort of shift that. And so then she goes through how to do that. She talks about obstacles, and she talks about really at the end, like taking action. And here are the things you need to do to play bigger. So it's a really pretty practical book, which I think is nice about it. And there's a lot of. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry. There's a lot of extra things you can do. So there's journal questions at the end of each chapter. There's some like really actionable stuff in here. And I know even on her website, I think she's got a few more things. There's a meditation or visualization that she mentions, and you can get that online. So I really love it when authors put that kind of stuff in a book, because it's that bridge, that extra step to actually get you from reading something to taking action on it.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I thought a lot of the exercises and journaling prompts were really useful. And I also like how authors put that stuff kind of in the back of the book, so you can keep returning to it rather than like fishing through chapters to try to find it. So that's always useful if you're a kind of person who likes to journal after reading a personal development book like this. Yeah. So what did you like about the book, Susan? What's one thing you liked? Yeah.
I liked a lot of it. I mean, it's generally my number 1 or number 2 recommendation for everyone. And I ask them what their favorite book is. This one is really high on my list. And I think, like you said, it just normalizes so much of what women feel, but we don't talk about that much. I think I really resonated with what she said about we're all kind of feeling these things, but we think it's only us. So we don't want to talk about it. And it turns out, a lot of women feel a lot of the same things. So we talked briefly before we got on live about the inner critic and how she normalized that and what that meant. Chapter 2 is the voice of inner wisdom. And I know that was kind of revelatory to me, because I hadn't ever really considered that there was this counterpart to my inner critic, and thinking about kind of your older, wiser self, and how you can access that was really, I thought, really insightful. And it's kind of hope inducing, because I think we all know our inner critic, but to know that there is that counterbalance there was very comforting.
Yes, I really like the emphasis on finding an inner mentor, like thinking of yourself as a mentor rather than going to that mentor outside of you. Like the wisdom is within. All you have to do is think about that inner mentor. And she says, I think it's like yourself 20 years in the future, something like that. And that's a really good mind shift to make, because now you're thinking about, like, it gives you so much perspective. Right? Like, my problems today, what am I going to think about them in 20 years? I'm not going to remember them. Right? They're not going to be that important in most cases, right? And if they are important, I will have worked through them by that time in one way or another. So being able to put yourself in those shoes in the future, I think, was really insightful and helpful.
It's like I said, it's just having that balance that, there's some other voice inside you. And you're right, the idea that this is inside you, because that is a theme that she touches on throughout the book, is that so often we take our authority from outside of ourselves. And to get in touch with that inner part of your own authority, it's just such a great message.
I agree. Yes. Love it. The other thing I think is really great that the other concept that really stuck with me, even these, 2 years in the future or 3 years in the future since I read it, is the distinction between the two types of fear. So these, I think she says, come from the Old Testament and the Bible. So I may not be pronouncing these correctly, but there's two types of fear: pashad and yira. And pashad is like the fear of imagined and projected things, like the fear of, if I create this website and put it out there, people are going to laugh at me, or, whatever it is, the fear that people are going to look at me in a strange way if I take this leap, right? Pashad. And then Yira is the kind of fear we experience when we take up a bigger space or play a bigger role than what we'd normally been playing. And she says the thing about playing bigger is shifting from pashad, like the imagined stuff, to this yira, like stepping into your power almost, right? It's scary to stand on the edge of the cliff before you jump off, right? but if you're going to take that leap, right? If you're going to take your business to the next level, or you're going to get a promotion in your career, you're going to be scared because you're doing something new. And it's not something to shy away from, right?
Yeah, and she said something about facing the fear and considering the outcome. It's not like, it's not that you're afraid of death. I mean, you're not doing something that could result in you having bodily injury, but to really face, okay, so what if I put this out there and people do laugh? What am I going to do? It's kind of just facing it a little bit more kind of in the face. It's such a lovely concept, the way she described those two.
Yeah, I agree. And it ties in so well with the way she looks at the inner critic too. Like, I think when I say she normalizes the inner critic, that's what I mean. It's like, look, criticism is natural, and people who are leaders and play big, they also have inner critics. It's not like the critic goes away. And the idea is you want to name it and recognize it. Right. And it's the same thing with the fear, right? When you name it and recognize it, it gives you the power to move past it. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What else did you notice? What else jumped out at you?
So one of the things that we mentioned before we went live was the good girl syndrome. And how so many women are kind of brought up with these cultural ideas about don't rock the boat, don't be too aggressive, don't be too arrogant, calm, you're the calm, comforting presence, be nice. And that how those really start to hold us back once we get into the workforce. And, it's a completely different system. It's one thing when you're in school. And then, she talked about this a couple times about when we're in school, it's all about pleasing our professors or pleasing our teachers. We've got this very clear idea of what we need to do to move forward. That system, that academic system, is completely unlike what happens in the real world. And if you take those lessons from the first basically 18, 24, 22 years of your life of thinking this way, and then you suddenly get into an environment with a completely different set of rules, it's a little overwhelming, and it's hard to shed those ideas about what you should do and shouldn't do unless you've got that kind of inner self-awareness and who you are and what's really important to you and what you're looking for.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. And it really struck me when I read it, the attributes of being a good student are not the attributes of being a good leader. So, and I was like, boing, mind explode. Yeah. I was like, oh my goodness. Yeah. And the way she explains it, like challenging authority, if you're going to, play big, you've got to be able to do that, and standing up for yourself and speaking up in meetings, like all of these things, like the good students, when you're a kid anyway, the good students are quiet and they sit still and they don't make waves. Yeah. And that really struck me too. Like, oh, right. Another way we're not teaching our kids to step into their careers.
It's like, and you think you're doing, I'm getting A's, I'm studying, I'm learning the right things. And then you kind of get into the real world, and the kind of coping skills and mechanisms that you had just aren't, there's no impact on that other world.
Right. Yeah. And it's, I don't think you realize it at the time, of course. You just think, like you said, you're getting A's, you're doing everything right.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you get out in the real world and you say, oh my gosh, like everything I need, the skills I need to be out here.
Right.
If I learned them, I probably learned them in kindergarten, when I started school.
Right.
Just like social interaction kind of skills and emotional skills, right?
Yeah, and I think you kind of start to learn how it is as you get into the workforce, but that can take a long time.
Right. Exactly.
To kind of start it can be very painful. I mean, I go back and I look at past things in my life. I'm like, oh yeah, I would handle that completely differently now. Even things I did 5 years ago, I would handle quite differently now.
Yes.
And it's kind of that you don't even know, when you're in school, you don't even know that there is a different system. So it's not like you can even prepare yourself for it.
Right. That's right. Yeah. Well, maybe it's a point for internships where you're actually in some ways more in the real world, seeing how things work. Although you're a little bit isolated as an intern as well.
That's true.
But it's getting in line. It's closer to what I think would be really useful for students coming out of college and things like that. Yeah. Super interesting. So this ties into one of my favorite chapters of the book, chapter 8, which I thought was nice because it had a lot of practical tips, and I realized a lot of those tips really stuck with me, and I had kind of internalized them. So chapter 8 is all about communicating and how you can communicate in a big way or a small way. And there's a lot of little things, little words even, that we use without even realizing it, but actually make us sound hesitant. They make us sound less confident. So example is like, I think, or I'm just emailing you to ask you about this thing, right? Like we might talk in that way, which makes us just limits our power, right? If people read that as wishy-washy, or they read it as, oh, this isn't a big deal, she's not really needing this now, right? Because, when you get a chance, could you just do these things? And also asking after you do an explanation, say if you're giving a presentation or doing some kind of work-related thing, does that make sense? Or the up-talking? We do that. We're making a statement sound like a question just by up-talking at the end. Right. So there's all these little communication tricks that she talks about, which I think are especially helpful, especially if you're new in your career or you're new to the workforce, that kind of thing. So I like those tips there.
I was a little embarrassed when I read that section because, I do that, I do that, I do that, I do that. On the other hand, just reading that made me so much more aware of what I was doing.
Yeah.
And now I mean, that awareness is kind of the first step.
Right.
You know, now that I'm more aware of these patterns and what they could mean to someone else, how can I start saying things that kind of take out that hesitation?
Exactly. Yeah, I think she even quotes, or one of her quotes is, change begins with self-awareness. So that's the first thing. And apologizing. I don't know if this was in this book too, but apologizing. So that's another thing that I learned to do, rather than, if you're running late, for example, right? Rather than saying, oh, I'm so sorry, say, oh, thank you for being patient, or thank you for waiting for me, that kind of thing, rather than always defaulting to the apology. I'm sorry for taking up space, you know. Right. Yeah. That's how you play bigger. Yeah. What else was on your list, Susan?
I think the only other thing on my list was, and it's a really powerful chapter. It's chapter 6 on hiding. And she talks a lot about the ways that we keep ourselves small, a lot of times without even realizing it. And again, this was another list that I feel like I hit more than one thing on the list. Yeah. She talks about this before that. So I have to have this experience before I can do that. I have to read this book before I can do that. I need more education before I can do this. Designing at the whiteboard, which is kind of doing all the design in your head, not getting any input from anyone. And you design this big thing and no one's interested. And then you're like, why did that happen? Yeah. Overcomplicating and endless polishing. Guilty. I'm like a black belt overthinker, and I have done this to myself more times than I really want to admit to. And I think the biggest one is omitting our own story, kind of divorcing what we do from the why and the passion. And I know that's something I'm trying to really get better about, is keeping my story in my business so people know why I'm doing it.
Yeah, those were all really powerful for me as well. And again, especially at the beginning of your business, where you do feel like, oh, I need to read another book before I create this program, or let me create this whole program, like you said, on the whiteboard, and then see if I can sell it. Right. And it's much better if you figure out the easiest way to do something, put it out there, see what happens, and iterate, right? And change it as you're going. That's take action, right? Action bias kind of idea. Yeah, right. Yeah, I like that. That was a really powerful chapter for me too. The only other thing that I think we haven't covered is her idea, talking about how there's no such thing as self-discipline. Which I liked, and also I think relates to our last book review on Atomic Habits. Because he talks, James Clear talks a lot about setting up your environment so that you can stick to your habits, right? If you want to go for a run, put your running shoes out, like that kind of stuff. And this is kind of what I think Tara Mohr means too, when she says there's no such thing as self-discipline. So we create action, she says, by putting supports in place for ourselves. So if, you're contemplating what kind of program to create, maybe you want to sign up for a course that helps you, a boot camp kind of course that gets you creating that course really fast and really quickly. Like, what support do you need to hit your goals, right? Rather than, okay, I'm going to work on my course, every day, or, putting it on your schedule. Maybe that's not the thing that's going to trigger you to actually take that action. So I thought that was a nice, powerful way to talk about changing your habits, right? It's not just that you've got to change your mind and become this whole different person overnight. You can create these baby steps around where you're trying to go. And I love that.
And surrounding you with the people who are going to help you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Support in all the different senses, right? Support in terms of resources and the people you need around you to build. Makes really good sense. So I think we had just a couple things that didn't resonate with us. I was saying before we went live that there was a chapter on finding your calling that I just kind of breezed over. I didn't, that language of calling doesn't really call to me anymore. And, I think I see what her point there. I think it doesn't have to have a religious connotation. It doesn't have to be, but I think my reaction actually comes from my background where I was a philosophy professor, and there was a lot in my mind. It was a vocation. It was like, I don't really need to get paid. Well, if I can teach philosophy the rest of my life, I'd be happy. This kind of thing. And I had kind of rebelled against that at that point in my life. And so I think part of my aversion to the calling chapter was that I was hearkening back to those attitudes that I was trying to get rid of. So,
yeah. And calling does kind of, it's very heavy with sort of responsibility and passion. Like, do I really feel, do I have enough? Because I mean, I think I'm similar to you. The idea of calling seems very big and like I have to do this or I'll die. And while I love what I do, I would not say it's on that level.
Right.
I would guess you're the same as well. There's a bunch of different things I could do that would make me happy.
Right.
So, one calling. On the other hand, people who do have that calling, I admire them so much for their ability to like nail it down and focus it and hit it every single day.
Yeah, and I think the idea of calling fits with playing big. Like that's a thing that can alleviate fear, right? Like, oh, I meant to do this, so it's scary, but I'm going to hold my breath and I'm going to jump. So I can see why she would bring it up there.
Yeah.
But, did resonate with me.
I mean, there's very little about this book that I don't like. I honestly believe every single woman should read it at some point in their lives, probably sooner rather than later.
Agreed.
If you're still in your 20s and you haven't read it, read it now because it will change the rest of your life. I did think the second half of the book was a little less meaty maybe than the first half. This is, I think, based on her course that she runs, her program. And maybe it's just that second half works better in a facilitated environment. But still, this is a book I'm going to keep going back to again and again.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the reasons we decided to review it, because we're looking at books that, have stuck with us and have been kind of pivotal in a lot of ways for us. Yeah. So this definitely fits the bill. And I agree 100%. If you haven't read this book, you should definitely check it out.
Yeah, I think for the amount of books that we both read on a regular basis, to have one that you do keep going back to, that says something.
Absolutely.
How powerful it is.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. I think that's right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think we were also saying before we started that, it's a testament to the book's power that we both read it years ago, and some of the things still stuck with us. Like we were both saying, we read it on our Kindles and we were like, oh no, I don't have any notes before jumping on here. We have our Kindle highlights, that's it. Yeah. But I was pleasantly surprised that, I remember the 2 types of fear. I remember this communication stuff. It kind of did, saturate my brain.
Yeah. I think there's such kind of foundational things. I think she's really touched on concepts that literally apply to every single woman in one sense or another. So, that kind of makes it so powerful.
Agreed. Yes.
Yeah.
Great book. Tara Mohr, Playing Big. Check it out. Highly recommend. Definitely the first half.
Yeah.
But read it all. It's all good.
It is.
Awesome.
All right.
Yes. Thanks, Susan. This was fun.
It was fun. Have we talked about our next book?
Yeah. What are we going to do for our next book? I don't know. I think we have it on our list somewhere.
Do you have your list? Find mine.
Right.
I think I have The Confidence Code. Is that next?
Yeah, I think that could be next. Or it's the one you're reading now with there's a book group.
Oh, Ditching Imposter Syndrome.
Yeah, I think we talked about both of them.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. Okay, so next month, We are trying to do these on, what did we say, the 4th Wednesday of the month at 3:30. So we are going to do either the confidence code or imposter syndrome. We'll decide. It'll be a surprise. Maybe we'll make an announcement or something. But if you enjoy our book reviews, check it out. And we will see you next month. And we will take this live and post the replay on YouTube, share the link, and we'll also do a short version for LinkedIn soon. So
yeah,
great. We look forward to seeing you guys in here again, and check out the replay. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.